Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's career as TV producers has fallen like a horse at the first hurdle, and now their $100 million deal is all but over. After the disastrous release of their big new Netflix series Polo, the chances of the streaming giant renewing the gruesome twosome's lucrative contract are virtually zero. Their naive dream of turning into titans of the television industry is dead in the water. No happy Hollywood ending for them. I watched Polo, their glitzy take on a niche horse sport for the privileged few, with an increasing sense of astonishment. It isn't just bad, it's awful. It isn't just boring, it's a toweringly tedious instant cure for chronic insomnia. After proudly glorifying themselves at the start of the rolling credits with the massive banner boast, "Executive produced by Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex," there's nowhere to hide. This mega turkey is down to their Montecito majesties, and everybody knows it. Quite why they ever thought anyone would give a damn about an elite bunch of sexist South Americans droning on about puckers and mallets remains something of a mystery. And quite why Harry decided that him not featuring in almost the entire series was a good idea is even more of a mystery. From the moment it hit the Netflix airwaves, the critics were united in their disdain. Urging its readers to skip all 5 feeble episodes, the influential Decider site declared, "Polo is a mostly boring look at a sport that very few people outside the elite circles will have any particular interest in." Exactly. In Britain, The Guardian dismissed Harry and Meghan's production as so inept, it's unintentionally hilarious. The newspaper continued, "It's a show about polo made by Prince Harry, who likes polo, and polo is the stupidest, most obnoxious sport known to humanity. It's the playground of the rich." Again, exactly. The pampered prince has delivered 5 hours of self-indulgent pap that is doubtless fascinating to him and his wealthy jet-setting cronies. But to those of us who live in the real world, those of us who have to pay our own way, these risible reality docs offer nothing whatsoever of interest. Harry's bosom buddy Nacho Figueres lives and breathes polo. Who cares? More to the point, who the hell is he? Harry's deluded decision to exclude himself, apart from 1 or 2 nanosecond appearances, deprives this Dullsville dud of its only possible attraction. Meghan crops up towards the end, wafting around in a ludicrously over-elaborate white gown, while her friend Serena Williams looks as if she'd rather be anywhere else. A bit like me as I sat in front of my TV struggling to maintain consciousness. With its weird, anonymous cast of dreary unknowns, this shambles of a show confirms Netflix's worst nightmare, that Harry and Meghan have no idea what they're doing. The dismal duo vowed to produce, and I quote, "content that informs but also gives hope." Never mind hope, Polo is hopeless. And it underlines that after their first imaginatively titled documentary, Harry and Meghan dumped a bucket all over the racist royal family and the entire nation of evil slave-driving Brits, the virtue-signalling Sussexes had nothing left in their ideas box. That festering pile of on-screen spite was followed by the worthy but plodding Invictus Games, and later some nebulous nonsense about leadership. Successful television has to be popular. The clever ones who are good at television understand what people want to watch. Isolated behind the gilded gates of their Californian castle in the sun, looking down on us from their private planes, peering at us through the tinted windows of their luxury limousines, cosseted Harry and Meghan haven't a clue. If you don't believe me, take a look at their pathetic, puny, paltry programme Polo. That's not entertainment.
Big story this morning on all the front pages, of course, all to do with Prince Andrew and the man who has been forced into the public eye, a man whose name was previously unknown, but which was actually released yesterday. Yang Tengbo is the name of the man that Prince Andrew introduced to various people in this country, and who he also appointed to run his kind of charitable organisation down in China. There's all sorts of murkiness going on. We thought we'd better check in with Nigel West, who's an espionage expert, to find out what on earth is going on between China and Britain, and how many of these spies, alleged spies, there might be here in the UK. Nigel, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, I mean, this story is kind of intriguing in some ways very ordinary, I suppose, like many spy stories are. Yang Tengbo says he's not a spy, he's just a businessman, and he happens to know Prince Andrew, happens to have been given a job by Prince Andrew, happens to have been photographed with David Cameron and Theresa May. I mean, these are all things that you would suspect a spy might do.
Not necessarily, but certainly an agent of influence. And I think that it's wrong to call him a spy based on the evidence that we have. What you've got to do is understand how this came about. There was a tip to MI5 that there was a problem with Steve Tang. And that tip may have come from a foreign country, an allied liaison relationship. It may have come from GCHQ. We don't know where the information came from originally. Then there was a brief investigation, and then the security service was confronted with the issue of whether or not to allow Tang back into the UK. And at that stage, his digital devices, an iPhone and a laptop computer, presumably, were seized, and there was compromising material on the laptop. Basically, Steve Tang boasting to colleagues how close he'd got to Prince Andrew. It doesn't make him a spy, and it doesn't make Prince Andrew a spy, but it creates a big problem. And for MI5 with limited resources, you can see how they would have gone for the ban and the exclusion order in favour of either a lengthy investigation or to try and turn and compromise Steve Tang himself and turn him into a double agent or even a defector. Yes. Those were the options available to MI5.
And I mean, in terms of what's happened since this all came out, I mean, for 2 days we weren't aware of the name until it was released, because I think in terms of Yang Tengbo's case, he wanted his name cleared, so he wanted it out there so that he could defend himself and say, look, I'm not a spy, and I want people to stop calling me one. But it does raise...
I'm not sure that I would agree with that interpretation. If you look at the chronology of the case, the reality is that his name was disclosed in the Republic of Ireland outside the jurisdiction of the High Court based on open source material. Yeah. It wasn't any kind of compromise, and based then on the inevitability of his name coming out, he then released it.
Right.
But sorry, carry on with your
question. The only reason I was giving you that interpretation was that was the interpretation given to me by the lawyers who were in the court yesterday, who were attempting to have the name lifted, and then they didn't have to attempt to have the name lifted because he had released it himself in the end, because he feared that it was going to come out in some way, shape or form in Parliament. But the question is now being asked by a lot of people as to how many of these types of people, whether they are influencers, whether they are agents, whether they are spies, how many of these kinds of people there are from China in Britain.
Or potentially thousands. And the reason is that every PRC national who is in the United Kingdom is here having developed some kind of a relationship, either directly or indirectly, with the Ministry of State Security. Everybody will have had a contact through their educational institution, their current employer, whatever it is, with MSS. And the MSS is the equivalent of a foreign intelligence collection agency and is hostile to the United Kingdom, and its sole task is to protect the interests not of China, but of the Chinese Communist Party.
I mean, I asked this question to somebody yesterday who said basically, like you did, that there are limited resources within MI5 and they can't really, keep an eye on absolutely everything. But to which I said, surely the royal family, you would imagine, would be an asset that they would wish to keep an eye on, even if they are short-staffed. There's not that many of them. And Prince Andrew, you might say, is perhaps the one who's most likely to find himself in what might be described as places he shouldn't really be.
Well, I think that probably what happened was that the security service made a decision to go and inform Prince Andrew of the situation, and he would have cut his ties with Steve Tang at that moment. But can I remind you of what happened in July 1960, when there were similar circumstances, and the cabinet secretary went to the Secretary of State for War at that time in order to obtain his help in compromising a Soviet agent who was the assistant naval attaché at that time, and the Secretary of State for War was Jack Profumo.
Yeah.
So I can well understand that the security service would not want to run an operation against Steve Tang with Prince Andrew in the background or involving Prince Andrew, and that's why I think that when Tang arrived at Heathrow Airport, he was given the option of giving up the passports to his material or surrendering his laptop, and that's exactly what he did, and that's where we are now.
And you're referring to him as Steve Tang. Well, we're talking about the same guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
In all his dealings in the UK, he's always been known as Steve Tang.
Right. And so he's being named as Yang Tengbo in most of the papers this morning, though. So it's not that clear, I suppose, who he's working for. I mean, he claims to have been working for Prince Andrew, effectively, as the head of this thing called Picture Palace China.
Yes, he's been doing that, and he's also been working for his own organisation, which is a consultancy called Hampton. And it's been very successful, particularly in promoting the interests of Gordonston School, which Prince Andrew had a connection with, obviously. They were going to have surrogates in the People's Republic of China. Now, that project has gone on hold, but Steve Yang was the key figure in all of that. And there is nothing wrong with what he was doing or what Prince Andrew was doing as a trade ambassador travelling the world promoting British exports.
No, although there does seem to be a suggestion that he might have been in receipt of some monies, depending upon how well the business did, which obviously would make it slightly grubbier, if nothing else. But he seems to have gone to China quite a bit, Andrew, as well.
Yes, but again, that was his job, promoting British exports, and he was very successful. And from all accounts, what he did on behalf of British exports was really quite impressive. The problem is the kind of people that he would encounter in China and in the UK who were connected with the United Front Worker Department. And that is a subsidiary of the Central Committee, the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party. And you've also got a problem with Steve Yang leaving material on his laptop, which indicated that he was boasting to colleagues of how close that he had got to Prince Andrew. It doesn't make Prince Andrew a spy. And of course, it rather undermines the status and credibility of the principal involved here. And you can see that MI5 really wouldn't have wanted to pursue this beyond simply just excluding him from the country. And that saves resources.
Yeah. But, I mean, will anything change now in terms of how they look at various different operatives in this country? I mean, when people become, for example, I mean, we've had stories in Parliament before this of, people have ended up working for MPs, who perhaps weren't vetted as well as they should have been. Will MI5 change the way they do this now?
No, because they have limited powers. They don't even have the power of arrest or interrogation. The security service will receive information from liaison services. It may rely on signals intelligence, intercepted emails and telephone calls, maybe physical surveillance, which indicates that a particular person like Steve Yang being in contact with somebody who is already contaminated, known to the security service as being a professional intelligence officer. It may well be that the security service had its own sources. I think that's unlikely. It may have been defector information. We don't know what triggered the original investigation, but once you get past that first stage of initiating a file and creating an investigation, then it's very resource heavy. And unless you can get cast iron evidence reasonably quickly and identify all the people involved, it might well be easier just to exclude. And that's what has been the practice thus far. And clearly that's what followed when Steve Yang's laptop was seized.
Yeah. Well, we shall see. I dare say there will be other lines of inquiry which end up being sort of dug up over time.
I believe the public are owed more information about what has been going on. He forged this close business and personal relationship with this Chinese spy, for that's what he was. His name is Yang Tengbo. He says, I haven't done anything wrong. Well, twice the courts of this land have decided he's a spy. When Suella Braverman, the then Home Secretary, kicked him out of the country, we decided he was a spy. And when he appealed against that decision in July, he's only just got the result of that appeal. Our courts decided you can't come back, you're a spy. So all of this, oh, he's an alleged spy, oh, he denies it. Forget about that. This guy is up to here in China. He's a Chinese guy giving information back to China, 100%. Prince Andrew formed an ill-advised close relationship with him, business and personal, over 10 years. During that 10 years, this guy Tengbo went to Buckingham Palace twice, went to St James's Palace, went to Windsor Castle, was photographed with former Prime Ministers David Cameron and Theresa May. Through Andrew, he managed to penetrate the higher echelons, the important echelons of British society, and God knows what he took back to Xi Jinping. But trust me, it will have been quite a lot. Now, here's the real question, though. Prince Andrew, not so long ago, up until about 2 months ago, was on the point of being kicked out of the Royal Lodge in Windsor because he couldn't afford the upkeep. King Charles wanted him out and was quite excited because he thought this will work because Andrew hasn't got a pot to piddle in, and therefore he won't be able to upkeep the Royal Lodge, and he'll have to get out because it's part of his leaseholder. He has to maintain it. He needed £3 million to get the Royal Lodge back up to speed. Suddenly, he had it. No, suddenly I've got it. Hang on, this is a guy with no money. He suddenly got £3 million. So the question is did he get it from Yang Tengbo? That's the question. Now, we're hearing, you know, that in fact, that wherever he got this money was passed, you know, as legitimate by the authorities, and so on and so forth. But what was this guy, this prince, who's always desperate for money, what was he really doing with this guy? How much in hock is he to this guy? We need to know more of this, because I think that the reason this is sort of being passed off as, oh, well, you know, Andrew's a bit of an idiot, he's an oaf, he's made a fool of himself. No. The reason it's being sort of shoved under the carpet a bit like that is because he's a member of the royal family. I want more details, and I want to know where he got that £3 million from.
Yeah, completely. I mean, because, you know, we're ultimately paying them. It's, you know, they're supposed to be public figures. But Andrew now reminds me, you know, at Christmas, everyone, families meet up, and there's always that one person who comes along a little bit wrong.
Oh, no, Uncle Andrew's here. Oh, no, yeah.
Uncle Andrew's, seriously, you got to be a little careful with him, but, you know, he'll be all right. Just, you know, accommodate him. There's a bit of that, and yeah, I think it needs to, again, it's back to that thing I said earlier about transparency and accountability. You know, he's a public figure. We need to get to the bottom of this matter and know what's going on. You know, they say that basically you should judge someone by the company they keep, and based on Andrew's track record, it isn't particularly good. Jeffrey Epstein being one. And then there's a case also with the royal family that, you know, I think the royal family, through Andrew and maybe one or two other things, it's not at an all-time high, especially beyond the Queen's death. And again, the government, but certainly the royal family need to get on top. They need to get in front of this particular story and give full disclosure about this. Personally, Andrew should not be part of this at all. You know, there's too much stuff going on there. It's been going on for a long time. He's not a significant member of the royal family in terms of the future of the royal family, but there has to be absolute transparency, because if the royal family is going to survive over the next 50 years or so, then the royal family needs to give that transparency. Yeah. They need to show the public that they are valued for money. It's not just about, oh yeah, they provide loads of tourism. No, it's not about that. It's about they need to provide public figures who the public actually like and warm to. And Andrew, that ship has sailed a long time ago.
Well, we need to ask about Andrew. Has this idiot compromised national security? Because it looks to me as if he may well have done. MI5 are investigating his highly dubious finances and his economic links to China. I mean, I know these things are going to have to remain in some way, you know, kind of fairly secret. But we, as a nation, we are owed an explanation here. Where did he get that £3 million? What exactly did this relationship with this Chinese guy, Yang Tengbo, entail? Because we know it was his business connection to China. It was business and personal. When we say business, what's going on? In Tengbo's notes in one of these trials, it was revealed that Tengbo had written of Prince Andrew that he had to this is Tengbo saying, I must limit my expectations about Prince Andrew because he's desperate. He's desperate. What he meant by that was he's desperate for money, and people who are desperate for money are likely to say anything in order to get their hands on that money. So I think what Tengbo was saying is, Andrew's likely to tell me anything that he thinks I want to hear because he needs the money. But this is an unacceptable situation that we cannot allow to pass because we doff our caps and we're deferential to the royal family. I don't care if he's the king's brother. In fact, that's the whole point. You know, we need to know exactly what has happened here. Of course, we know that, you know, Prince Andrew wasn't exactly, or isn't exactly, China's only point of connection to the British establishment. They've got their tentacles everywhere. But the fact that they were into the brother of the king for 10 long years, a man who's constantly in need of money, needs full explanation. We need to know what the hell went on. Just as a couple of facts, of course, here. Prince Andrew has apparently stated the king has a big Christmas lunch on Thursday at Buckingham Palace. Andrew has stated that he doesn't see why he shouldn't go to that because it's a family occasion. I can think of lots of reasons why he shouldn't go, mate, but he probably will. But he's in effect been banned from Sandringham, the royal festive gathering over Christmas. Won't be seen when they go to church on December the 25th. Fergie apparently persuaded him, so tell your brother you won't be coming, just to spare the king's embarrassment. But it was explained, shall we say, to Prince Andrew, don't go. So the guy's a total embarrassment, but we need to know where. I think the key question is just this: where did he get that £3 million from? If it's from this Chinese guy, this is serious.
Let's talk to Professor Anthony Gleeson. He's an expert in security and intelligence and joins us now. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. My question that I've been putting to our audience today, after this Chinese spying row, this man finally named H6, the alleged spy, as Yang Tengbo. The court's basically agreeing to his demand that he be named, even though he was the one who said he didn't want to be named originally. Basically, Prince Andrew's man in Beijing. This man was at the heart of Prince Andrew's business operations, invited to his 60th birthday party. Now, poor old Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, his ex, aren't going to be invited to Sandringham at Christmas. Oh dear, but it's not about who sits where on Christmas Day or is seen with King Charles outside the church on Christmas Day. This is about Chinese spies at the heart of government. So the question is, what should Britain do about the threat from China?
Well, I think the first thing that it needs to do is to ensure that people in influential positions, like the Duke of York, understand exactly what sort of country China is and what it does. I mean,
I think he does understand. It's a very rich country. They've got a lot of people with a lot of money that can help make him rich. That's what he understands.
Yeah, I think the essential thing that he appears to have missed, and don't let's beat about the bush here, we know what Tengbo got out of the relationship with Prince Andrew, it's the best cover for a spy that you could possibly imagine, to be best mates with the 8th in line to the British throne. It opens doors for you wherever you want to go.
Yeah, you're kind of vouched for. Is there an extent that people would say, well, if he's hanging around and he's involved with Pitch the Palace with something that the King's brother is doing or the then Queen's son is doing, that kind of people go, well, he must have been vetted. He must be okay.
Exactly so. It is unique. Frankly, I can't think of any other British espionage case which has involved somebody getting as close to the source or one of the sources of power in this country as this case.
Does Prince Andrew have power?
Of course, he has influential power. He's a global celebrity, not always for the right reasons, I should add. But everybody knows him, and you and I are talking about him this morning. And as I say, he remains 8th in line to the throne, and you can sack somebody for doing this and doing that, and somebody can resign for doing this and doing that.
Yeah.
But you can't resign or be sacked for being the brother of the King of England. Yeah. So this is a really big thing. And we know what Tengbo got out of this. We don't know what Prince Andrew got out of it.
Yeah.
I think that is a really important question now. But to go back to your point, what should Andrew have known? He should have known that in 2017, the Chinese government passed a law, a national security law, placing a duty on every single Chinese person to act as an intelligence agent for the Chinese state in everything that they did. And there was a double duty on Tengbo because he was a member of the Chinese version of the Communist International, the Comintern, the United Front Department in Beijing. So the moment that this man appeared on the prince's horizon, either Andrew or one of his advisors should have said, hang on, think about the Chinese national security.
But hold on a minute. Where were MI5, MI6? Where were they in this? Why? I always thought this was rather strange, like the Jeffrey Epstein situation. Oh, this man has been already convicted of basically child sex trafficking. Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. You should absolutely go and stay at his house in New York to break off your friendship for 4 days the way you do. The fact that security people weren't going, I don't darn well think so, I find extraordinary. Would they have known this guy? Would they have been watching this guy? Did they want to see what this guy did? Do you think they knew, or did they have no idea? And if they had no idea, why didn't they?
I'm sure that at some stage, 2020, 2021, MI5 realised who Tengbo was and what his game was. Remember, he'd been in the UK for 2 decades, studied at York University. My hunch is that he was a long-term penetration agent. He was pushed into the United Kingdom 2 decades ago in order to be able to say, well, I've lived in Britain for 2 decades, I'm entirely honest. We do need to know at what stage MI5 got really serious about him. We do know that they did get really serious about him, because that's how we've got this evidence from Tengbo's phone when cheekily he tried to re-enter the United Kingdom. And everything that I say to you and said to other people kind enough to ask me about it is based on what has come off his smartphone. Tengbo's own smartphone. And what that reveals is not only that Dominic Hampshire, Prince's senior aide in this horrible, disgraceful, shaming business, was the conduit. But in his letters, he writes to Tengbo, you've achieved a position that many people would, give their right hand to achieve. You're a close friend of the prince and his family. Don't forget that. And he adds, you have guided us so that we can do what you want to do without officials interfering and the wrong people presenting themselves. That is all in the letter. That is, in my opinion, verges on the criminal, I have to say, because what it means is that Tengbo, either an agent or an officer of the Chinese intelligence service, we can't be sure, is directing what Prince Andrew does.
Yeah.
Now, I say Prince Andrew should have known. I wouldn't be surprised if MI5 had said, we've got worries about this, but probably received the answer to go and boil their heads.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't be assumed that, the royals particularly like the spooks. Most people in government don't like the spooks. Tell them to keep their nose out of their business. So I don't think we can assume straight away that MI5 didn't know about this. But of course,
and even if they warned, whether they were listened to. But this is the thing, isn't it, in terms of what we then do? Because this isn't just about Prince Andrew. And as you say, that influence he had, people getting to go to the palace, then being able to go to other events, having a picture with David Cameron and Theresa May and another royal prince. I mean, Prince Michael of Kent is always involved in one of these things, isn't he? I mean, the thing is, people aren't... Often we think of this as, a spy sidling up to someone on a bench in the park in Westminster and basically saying, we've got pictures of you with your mistress, you're bought and paid for, now do what you're told, give us secrets. It's not that blatant most of the time. It's much more subtle. Money doesn't change hands in brown envelopes. It's not, again, it's just sort of the tentacles of the Chinese government, the huge economic might of the Chinese government. These things have much more subtle influences, but those influences are very real. What do we do about the threat of this totalitarian, murderous dictator state wanting to basically break the West and impose their values, lack of them, on the rest of the world? I mean, they're already buying up buying up Africa and South America and the Caribbean. They want to buy us up too. How do we stop that threat?
We say no. We say no. We put more money into our security. We put more money into our security service. They always rather late on the scene, I'm afraid. Now, They would say they react. They're not proactive because we don't want to have a secret police in this country. They'll only to react. I think they have been far too late on the Russia threat, on the China threat, and probably on the Iran threat as well. However, they are now there. We've got to ensure that they've got the resources to deal with these people. But you also have to educate those in power that if they dabble with the Chinese, and you say, Julia, money doesn't change hands in brown envelopes. I'm sure you're right about that. But money does change hands. Yeah. The three reasons why people betray their country, they betray it for ideological reasons. Well, I don't think there are many people, starting from the prince down, who have an ideological kinship to China. Then people do it for sex. Well, I don't think that's the issue here. And then people do it for money. Well, that may be the issue. We don't know what was in it for Prince Andrew, and that is what we need to be told. That's much more important as to whether or not he has Norfolk turkey for his Christmas dinner with the rest.
Absolutely.
I just wonder, we've got more information now about this alleged Chinese spy. We know him only as H6 because he is his name is injuncted. We can't tell you his name, even if we knew what it was, which I don't. But he's been tied to Prince Andrew. Now we know, because of the front of the Sunday Times, more and more information has come out over the past 48 hours that he has been meeting David Cameron and Theresa May. And actually, a lot of what people have been saying about this is that it's not just about Prince Andrew, it's about the doors that Prince Andrew would open. I wonder, as a former head of royal protection, whether this guy would have got past your vetting and your protection of the royals.
Well, a very good morning again. In truth, the security services would have been the ones who would have vetted anybody, presumably, again, when they're meeting with prime ministers and so on and so forth. What worries me, well, there's a number of worries, and my eyebrow went up 2 days ago when I heard about all this. It was the people then that Andrew would have been associated with. I don't think he gets given state secrets, but he would mix in those circles then, perhaps, that would discuss certain elements, particularly when they'd been drinking and all the rest of it. I mean, the Chinese are in for the long game. They are there and they try and influence the House of Lords, members of Parliament, and so on and so forth. As I say, I don't think he was given state secrets. What is interesting is where his income has come for the last 20-odd years. That's what I have been asking for. And there ought to be an audit trail, because if it was anyone else who represented the United Kingdom for 20-odd years as a so-called trade ambassador, there ought to be an audit trail. Who did he meet? What was the success? And were there side issues involved, including making money for himself? There are so many questions that have been asked. And as usual, if you try and get those answers from the establishment, they close ranks and they say there aren't any. Well, that's nonsense. There are ambassadors out there, many of whom were absolutely appalled by his actions, and yet it's all covered up. It's time we came clean on his finances and who he really was talking to at home and in China. And the only people probably that can do that are the security services.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Sunday Times reporting the suspected Chinese spy became a close confidant of the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, has met 2 former prime ministers. The alleged agent has been banned from Britain now, met Lord Cameron and Theresa May, David Cameron and Theresa May on separate occasions, kept pictures of the encounters on the desk of his London office. And there's this kind of idea of elite capture, isn't there? An H6 meeting May and Sir Philip May at a black tie event, entering into business activities with him. It's interesting, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith is saying, the former Conservative leader, of course, he's saying that he will table an urgent question in the House of Commons tomorrow demanding answers from the government about how Andrew came to be compromised. I wonder, is this actually the government's responsibility, do you think? Is this Prince Andrew's responsibility? You're talking about questions for the royal family as well. They would say, and have said actually, because Prince Andrew is not a working royal, they can't really control him and they can't really look into his finances.
Well, I find that nebulous, to put it frank to you. He was a member of the royal family and still is. He's a member of the family. He's still in line for the throne. This is nonsense for them to say it's nothing to do with us. We were collecting fares upstairs, as the saying goes. Absolute nonsense. He was appointed by somebody in whatever government it was, whether it's Cameron or others, 2001 from memory, to be our trade ambassador. Who actually appointed him? What was the audit trail? What vetting has been carried out since then as to his dealings, where his finances come? He has a litany of dreadful decisions, dreadful people that he's worked with. I don't want to kick the man when he's down, but clearly he is an important, or was an important man in the British establishment. He would have mixed with people, as I say, who would have had perhaps knowledge and information. That's why he has been targeted. Now, did the Chinese pay him in any shape or form? What subsidiary companies they were? As an investigator, which I have been since I retired some years ago, I would be asking these questions. Yeah. I remember tackling a relative of the Sultan of one of the sultans, and cut a long story short, you try and getting information from them, from the Foreign Office and others, it proves impossible. So there are a lot of questions to be asked, whether Parliament should be asking. Yes, if nobody else will answer them, let's ask it in Parliament and let's see where that takes us.
Di, as someone who has been a head of royal protection, what sort of, there must be a lot of people who want access to the royals. How much is that controlled? How much can sort of hangers-on actually get into the room? How much vetting is there of, you know, royals go to events all the time, they meet all sorts of people, and actually we want them to because they're representatives of the nation, they're people who people want to meet in informal contexts and so on. But in terms of influencing them, in terms of becoming close to them, did you ever have suspicions with people who were perhaps not always having the royals' best intentions at heart? Because they are very, very attractive people to get close to, even if they're Prince Andrew in this case.
Well, I think the Epstein case illustrates that the police, or anyone else, in the past certainly, have had very little influence on who royals, if they invite them, the police are told X, Y, and Z is coming to you. And unless there's obvious reasons, and I can go back to when I informed the royal family about Fayed all those years ago with Princess Diana, I then chose to actually say, look, you shouldn't go on holiday with this man. I can't recall any other occasion, but I can recall that we were aware of some people that you and I perhaps wouldn't want to have invited. But if Prince Andrew said Fred Bloggs is coming, Fred Bloggs came. Yeah. And unless you could show he was a mass murderer or something, and in truth, I don't think we, as the royalty protection, actually vetted people to that extent, unless there was specific reasons or some intelligence came to light.
As ever, Christmas is coming, the goose is getting fat, and we've all told Prince Andrew to stop, no, get down, shut up. Prince Andrew's been told not to show his face anywhere. not at Sandringham, not at Balmoral, probably not even at Windsor, to be honest. He's been pictured on the front page of The Sun this morning. Andrew stuffed at Christmas with his head superimposed onto a turkey. He's about as welcome as a dose of the scabies at this point, I think. Rupert, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Well, at the moment, he is definitely persona non grata within the royal family, and he's only got himself to blame because it's his ability to find friends who seem to create trouble. Now, obviously, the latest one with this Chinese businessman who denies vehemently that he's a spy,
Yeah.
but let's be honest, any spy, a self-respecting spy, is going to do it. Most notably, remember what Kim Philby did in 1954, categorically said he wasn't the third man. And a few years later, it was found out that he was.
Right.
So what you've got here is, and what's even worse, he helped found his Picture Palace organisation, which reportedly any income that generated, Prince Andrew is supposed to have been able to charge 2% commission.
Yes.
So what you've got here is he needs to then be absolutely clear what this man has done and been involved with. And if he founded it, and has helped Prince Andrew make money, then it's even worse look.
Well, exactly. It's very grubby, isn't it?
Well, this has probably been his problem throughout in recent years. Remember, obviously, his most notable, notorious, whatever you want to call it, friendship was with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
So it's actually just par for the course. He just has an inability to choose his friends or business associates wisely because he's in desperate need of money. And
well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's always about money.
Yeah, because he's got to fund the Royal Lodge. He says his funds are fine and are all above board. The palace agree with that because it's very difficult to go snooping around other people's finances, even members of the royal family. But there is a question that if there is any hint that this guy, well, is obviously found guilty of being a spy, and then Prince Andrew's got something to answer for to say exactly what was his relationship with this guy. He said he didn't pass anything on, but actually they're very clever the way they operate.
Yeah.
It's basically sort of being sleepers and sort of opening doors and finding the right people for China to do business with that might actually be a benefit
well, I mean,
to them.
Clearly a lot of it's about introduction, isn't it? I mean, he didn't get to have his picture taken with David Cameron and Theresa May, both when they were Prime Minister, without probably knowing somebody who was reasonably influential who could get him into that space, and maybe that person was Prince Andrew.
Well, that we don't know, but what we are, so the way they operate is to try and get into the corridors of power. We've seen it with other instances in recent years with people within Parliament having association with Chinese people. So it is very difficult for Prince Andrew to sort of distance himself from this. So I have to say he is going to have a very lonely Christmas because obviously there was going to be a big gathering up there, but now he and his ex-wife will be holed up in the Royal Lodge, although I suppose they might go to their son-in-laws who that's where their daughters are going, so they might be able to go off to one of those. But in terms of being seen with the rest of the royal family, that is just not happening. They are probably rolling their eyes in bitter frustration once again with his choice of friends.
Yeah, absolutely right. And of course the other problem for Andrew is that he has supposedly, I think I'm right in saying, sort of acquired some money over recent times because he was due to move out, wasn't he, of Windsor Lodge, unless he could afford to sort of stump up some cash. He's obviously now got some cash because he's staying there. So questions are going to be asked about where he's got that from, won't there be?
Without question. And, you know, although it's hard to, you know, he's saying that it's money that is absolutely above board.
Yeah.
But
found it down the back of the sofa in bedroom number 9.
Well, there is just a perception problem. It was the same with the Virginia Giuffre scandal. You know, it was the perception that he just has an ability, as I say, to not find sensible friends who don't seem to ended up in hot water. But he's only got himself to blame. His arrogance, unfortunately, has led him to get into this situation, thinking he's absolutely right, but actually he's been very much hoisted by his own petard.
He has indeed. And does he still have money to come from his mother, from the Queen? Did he get an inheritance, or is that sort of one of those things that comes every now and again?
I'm not sure of the finances. I'm sure he got some, But actually, when you've got a £3 million, I think, security bill alone just on Royal Lodge and then the upkeep, he needs a substantial amount of money to maintain his lifestyle, even though he's no more than a prisoner in his own house, because he can't go anywhere, because he's not, in the eyes of the public, he is definitely persona non grata.
Yeah, absolutely.
I must ask you, first of all, I mean, you now work in sort of big, PR, long-term sort of strategic advice for companies and individuals, having been a political editor of a national newspaper for many, many years. What would your advice be to Prince Andrew right now as he's being urged to stay out of sight over this Chinese spy scandal? This guy, H6, we're only allowed to call him H6 because of a British court order. But what would your advice to Prince Andrew be?
It's a very, very difficult situation that Prince Andrew finds himself in, obviously, and we all can see that, and we all know that, and a period of quiet and keeping out of the cameras is obviously the way to go for him.
Not an Emily Maitlis interview?
I think that we all know that Emily Maitlis's interview was obviously a tempting moment for the Prince, and he decided wrongly, in my view, to take that offer. I mean, here's a situation that he can't win in, and he needs to probably just keep out of the limelight for a very long time. And I think, for the royal family, who are always in the spotlight, particularly at Christmas, it's very important that the focus is on family and all the messages that they want to send to the country. We know that the King and the Princess have both been going through really difficult health scares this year, and we wish them all the best. But the Prince Andrew issue is not going to go away easily. It's a very important issue, the H6 issue, which I prefer us to focus on. That's the bigger issue, not whether Prince Andrew was somebody who was duped. I mean, Prince Andrew would have taken the advice of the Foreign Office, I'm sure of that. And the Foreign Office has subsequently said, this guy is somebody we need to be worried about, and the government has taken the right steps. It's a much deeper and bigger issue.
Indeed. We were talking to former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat. Yeah, he says, this is the tip of the iceberg. The only reason we know about this really is because it involved Prince Andrew, but obviously still trying to sort of find out more details about who this man was. But clearly, fingers in many different pies at the heart of the British establishment.
But I want to talk about Russia first and Prince Andrew, because Prince Andrew is all over the papers today. MI5 investigating his cash from China and the fact that there was a high-ranking spy, or alleged spy anyway, H6 is all that he's known at the moment, who got very, very close to Prince Andrew. Well, Tobias Elwood is with me now, who's the former Conservative MP. Tobias, on a different channel, they're actually running a clip of you right now, and that gave me slight heart failure thinking that you're actually on another channel. But it's wonderful to have you on Talk, so thank you for your time this afternoon. What do you make of this affair in regard to Prince Andrew? Because China is a really worrying, pernicious threat. Their espionage, a slightly different way. This isn't sort of James Bond. This is about influence, isn't it? This is about changing and shaping the debate.
Yes, I'm glad you introduced it in that way, because it, on the face of it, is a royal story, but actually it's about our security. It's about what China, what Russia, what other countries are doing to infiltrate Britain and to exert influence. And China is very, very good at it. This is what we call grey zone warfare. It's all part of a bigger geopolitical game, if you like, of power against the West, including against Britain, seeking these opportunities, our vulnerabilities in our society of waiting to get into privileged access, such as with Prince Andrew. And it's about perhaps pushing a more positive image of China, but also about understanding our secrets, causing economic harm, sowing a little bit of political discord as well, espionage opportunities and intellectual property theft. It's all about taking advantage of those who will be vulnerable. And Prince Andrew was always going to be high on the list, given what's happened to him. And there perhaps is a question there for the royal household to say that maybe he does require to have better people around him to offer that advice, to make sure he doesn't get caught up in these traps such as this. And as I say, it exposes this wider, perhaps, absence of strategy, because it isn't just Prince Andrew. Any business wanting to do work or trade with China needs to clarify how we can operate and work with this gargantuan giant of an economy, but on a way that is safe and on terms that are equal, rather than that could be usurped or used against us.
We've seen a number of times, we've seen MPs targeted by China, quite low-ranking MPs in some cases. We've seen a disgraced royal in the case of Andrew, and the fact that, you know, some might argue and say, well, why bother? I mean, he's not someone who has so much influence since his fall from grace a few years ago. Why do this? And to me, that actually sort of answers a question by itself, although you're the expert in this, Tobias, in that it's everywhere. It's not just about the people who are at the absolute centre of power. Obviously, the king's brother is going to be a target, but actually, there's so much of this from the Chinese, isn't there?
Yes, and China doesn't do anything today that it can do better in about 10 years' time. And when you have that time frame, you can imagine that if you get involved and understand what researchers are, for example, doing in the House of Commons, where may they all be in 10 years' time? They could be the next generation of members of parliament, or the big leaders in our industries and so forth. So this is why it's a long-term effort of them harvesting data, of making the connections, of advancing up the power chains in order to exert greater influence in the longer term. This is the big, as I say, power game, this grey zone warfare that Russia and China and other nations are now conducting on us. And we've been very late in the day to understand it.
Few entertainment professionals had a worse year than Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, executive producers of Polo. But Katy Perry was one of them. A recent New York Post headline read, "Why Katy Perry is 2024's biggest pop flop yet. As generic comeback trashed for having no personality. I too preferred her in a bra that squirted whipped cream." I also feel like she spent way too much time away from the music scene as a judge on American Idol, but other commentators point to Katy's decline around the branding of a feminist anthem titled Woman's World while working with a producer who was accused of assaulting a woman, pop star Kesha. Said producer denies the allegations, but the contradictions were very, very clear to Katy's typically very, very loyal fan base. Called a hypocrite for the July 2024 collaboration, Katy's lead single absolutely bombed with a 1-star review from The Guardian. It peaked at number 47 in the UK and number 63 in the US of A. Thoroughly disappointing when you remember that Katy once tied Michael Jackson's record for sending 5 songs from a single album, 2010's Teenage Dream, to number 1. Flopping hard aside, Katy Perry and Meghan Markle have multiple things in common. For one, Meghan Markle and Katy Perry have both snogged Russell Brand, which is something I just remembered and secretly love. Katy was actually dating Russell when he kissed Meghan, and get him to the Greek. Number 2, they both live in Montecito, California. Montecito is home to numerous celebrities, including Oprah Winfrey, Rob Lowe, and Gwyneth Paltrow. You'll hear that name a couple of times. Number 3, they both are allegedly bullies. Say it ain't so. We'll get to why Prince Harry has been begged to ditch Katy Perry from the Invictus Games by the son of a disabled war vet in a second. But let's recap Harry's history with the Sussexes. Shots fired. Back in 2018, Katy told Entertainment Tonight, "I would have done one more dress fitting." When asked about Meghan Markle's wedding gown in an interview with ET, the comment resurfaced in May of 2023 following Katy's performance at King Charles's coronation concert. You know, we thought she was on the winning team, but alas. In May of 2021, Prince Harry told the Armchair Expert podcast, Dax Shepard, or as I like to call him, Kristen Bell's husband, that Orlando Bloom regularly warned him about paparazzi in their area. He said just 2 days ago, Orlando Bloom sent me a message because he's just down the road and we sort of keep in contact because of the paparazzi. This bizarre relationship is all the more humorous when you remember that in 2020, Orlando played Prince Harry in the HBO Max animated series, The Prince. I mean, thankfully for Prince Harry, HBO canceled The Prince after one season, primarily due to its negative reception from critics. But Orlando did a great job of making Prince Harry look and sound like an absolute idiot. In February of 2023, the Sussexes were among the celebrity guests who witnessed Ellen DeGeneres and Portia de Rossi's surprise vow renewal. Other guests included Kris Jenner, Katy Perry in Orlando, and Gwyneth Paltrow. In November of 2023, Prince Harry and Meghan were branded eco-hypocrites after taking an Oil Heirs private jet to a Katy Perry concert in Las Vegas. By the way, I live near Harry and Meghan relatively. You can get in the car and drive to Vegas so easily. The private jet is completely unnecessary. The founder of Travelist, a company that aims to provide travelers with sustainable options, Prince Harry, flew private alongside his wife, Meghan Markle, actress Cameron Diaz, and her husband, Benji Madden, to name a few. Fun fact, hours later, Harry's brother and heir to the throne, Prince William, flew on a commercial British Airways flight to Singapore for the Earthshot Prize Awards. In June of this year, a certain publication, we're not going to bother naming them, claimed Katy and Orlando gleefully attended Harry and Meghan's daughter Lily's private/intimate birthday party. While likely not blatantly shading those reports, Katy Perry turned her Google alerts off long ago. Perry did squash the legitimacy of those rumors by posting how proud she was of her fiancé, Orlando Bloom, for spending 5 days in Central Africa working for UNICEF at the same time of the Sussex's B-Day fiesta. Earlier this month, it was announced that the Invictus Games, which is slated for Vancouver next year, will feature a live performance from Katy Perry as part of its opening ceremony festivities. Reaction was certainly mixed, but now one military family is begging Prince Harry to give Perry the boot. Katy Perry versus Carl Westcott involves a claim that Mr. Westcott's judgment was clouded by powerful medication and ill health when he sold his home to Katy on July 15th, 2020. He had only purchased the house in May of that year and moved in 2 months prior to his dealings with Katy's representatives. The then 80-year-old had been discharged from the hospital only 4 days prior to signing, having undergone a 6-hour back operation. He was on a potent cocktail of drugs to numb the pain, his lawyers said. When the medication wore off, Westcott said he realized he'd made a horrible mistake and informed Katy's team by email on July 22nd that he no longer intended to sell his home. The combination of his age, frailty from his back condition and recent surgery, and the drugs he was taking several times a day rendered Mr. Westcott of unsound mind, his complaint argued. Katy's agents disregarded Westcott's plea, writing to him days later to warn they would sue if he did not give up the property. Westcott's family took up the fight on his behalf after he became bedridden and mentally incapacitated because of Huntington's disease, which attacks the brain and can cause progressive dementia. Now, Katy emerged victorious in the first phase of their trial last year after a judge ruled there was no persuasive evidence that Westcott lacked the capacity to sign the contract. I mean, hello, I'd say the man is currently bedridden and incapable of functioning by himself. But, you know, who am I? Who am I to judge? Literally, I'm not the judge. Now, according to the Daily Mail, the family of the disabled war veteran in the legal battle with Katy Perry has sent a scathing letter to Prince Harry just days after she was announced as the headliner for Invictus. Carl Westcott, the former owner of Katy's Montecito mansion, embroiled in this lawsuit, has been countersued now by Katy for $6 million in damages. And it's his children that are having to represent him through this battle. And they're saying they're not going to back down. Obviously, Carl is not in a position to defend himself at this point in time, so his children are having to take it on. In a letter sent to Prince Harry, exclusively obtained by the Daily Mail, Carl's son, Chart Westcott, details his family's concerns about Katy performing at the Invictus Games Vancouver 2025 on February the 8th. According to the Mail, Harry and Meghan are now close pals with Perry and Bloom, like attracts like in the universe when you're a bully, allegedly, who will soon be forced to testify in court over the legal battle with Westcott, Orlando Bloom, now too, in Montecito, California. Carl, a veteran of the U.S. Army, has been bedridden for over a year as he continues to battle Huntington's disease.
MI5 probes Duke's cash from China. The Times this morning, Duke's spy went into palace. We've got a very pithy headline here from the Mirror. China crisis. This is a terrible look. I mean, it's beyond a terrible look. This is according to the Telegraph. Chinese money given to the Duke of York is being investigated by the security services, according to the Telegraph. Now, Prince Andrew's business venture is understood to have received money from Chinese donors with links to the Communist Party. This disclosure really, I think, is the thin end of the wedge. The alleged spy apparently was a close confidant of the Duke in court documents. He'd been banned from the UK on national security grounds. The Duke himself insists that he ceased all contact with the alleged spy after concerns were raised, and saying that nothing of a sensitive nature was ever discussed. This is in every single paper this morning. He just has a terrible track record at choosing his friends wisely.
We said this outside. He just can't get it right. He's a PR nightmare, and I think, yeah, you're right. His choice in friendship. If you were friends with him, you think, uh-oh,
I'm a wrong one.
Yeah, exactly. Something's going to come up. Yeah, so I don't. It's difficult. I mean, I feel like he's always going to say that, though, isn't he? We didn't discuss anything sensitive, because he's not going to say, oh, we discussed all the big things.
But he's the brother of the king.
Mm. Well, it makes me think, how easy is it to get to these guys? I mean, is it a case of you show a bit of money to say that you're going to invest in something close to their heart and all of a sudden you're in? I don't know. It makes you think, is the process not rigorous enough to be buddies with these guys?
Well, it's extraordinary, because there's another sort of side to this story, because it goes further to say Buckingham Palace has no way of scrutinising the Duke's finances. Now, you have to ask yourself, how does he pay for Royal Lodge? It's a very modest property of 30 bedrooms. And, of course, he was adamant that he wasn't going to move out of Royal Lodge. That money is coming from somewhere. The question now hanging in the air is, where is it coming from? I feel deeply sorry for the king, actually, because the transition from his mother to him becoming monarch was never going to be easy. But actually, I think the king's done a really good job. And here we have his brother, yet again, causing problems for the royal family.
You know, I'm currently watching the end of The Crown, right? And that's all about kind of popularity and approval ratings, and how the royal family kind of constantly were looking about making sure they were in step with public mood.
Yes.
And I'm sure lots of insiders and the king himself will be very upset with this story, because they'll just think it's certainly not going to help their cause.
So there's other parts to this story as well, if you are just waking up. The king was made aware of this MI5 investigation into his brother and the alleged links to the Chinese agent before that bombshell judgment, where the king then said, you're on your own. You have to pay for yourself. So this has been out in public, or within the confines of the palace, for some time. I was just looking back, actually. There's a wonderful article, if you have time to read it, in the Telegraph. 50 years of humiliation, a timeline of Prince Andrew's most scandalous moments. I mean, it is quite extraordinary. If you go back to the 1980s...
His memoirs are going to be a bestseller.
Well, are they? Well, are they? If you go back to the 1980s, the Koo Stark years and Randy Andy. Koo Stark, you're too young, but he dated this model actress, Koo Stark, after meeting her on a blind date in the 1980s. Right. She had appeared in a naked shower scene for a film in 1976 called Emily. She was deemed to be an unsuitable partner for a member of the royal family. And then he was called Randy Andy. Because basically he was caught in the girls' house at Gordonston for the first 3 days, but that never ever left him. This idea that he was Randy Andy, he was the Playboy Prince, he flew around the world. I mean, there are a lot of stories about how he likes flying in helicopters, and of course with all of that comes the trappings of success and family.
Yeah, I think you've got to be so careful these days, you know, with what people can say. And all of it, even if it's not true, you're still screwed, aren't you? I mean, you can say anything now, and the whole innocent until proven guilty is out the window. Someone just has to say something, and if you're out of line, you're done for. And I think on his memoirs, I think if he did release them, most of us have already read it over the past few years, really, so maybe it wouldn't be a bestseller.
Well, absolutely, in instalments. What does it say about the royal family? Because The king is very, very clear. He wants to have a narrowed down royal family, which I think he's found to his detriment isn't always the right thing to do when he's been ill, Camilla's been ill, and then Kate's been ill. But at the same time, he has to show value for money to the public. Then you've got your brother, who you can't control.
I think it's difficult because someone like him would maybe want to micromanage on lots of different things, whether it's his brother or whether it's his son. You know, I feel like there are such, I guess, more pressing things, and he has to not let these individuals tarnish his own name. That's the problem with a big team. You know, people can ruin it for you. So it's unfortunate when they're that in the inner circle, though.
But surely, if you're on the civil list and if you are being looked after under the auspices of that family, then you have a duty to do what you were born into, which is actually to support the family, not to run around as Air Mars Andy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm
just throwing it out there.
He can't help himself. But then again, it is human nature, isn't it? For someone like him, if he's given such power, if he's given such, you know, title and money, is it not just kind of a natural human desire to kind of fulfill it, and not justifying what he's doing, but to fulfill it to the max, really?
Well, is there an issue here which, and we talked about this a lot with William and Harry, an heir and a spare? If you're the spare, what do you do? What is your raison d'etre?
Smile and wave.
Smile and wave, or become really miserable and think, actually, I deserve a position in this world.
Or feel disenfranchised and go off to California.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly.
But then again, that makes you think you can't blame, really, because you think, well... I mean, I personally...
Which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about Harry now, right? I mean, I personally think what he's done is extremely negative and damaging and very self-interest and all that sort of stuff. But part of me, a small part of me does think, yeah, but... if you were him, would you want to go and try and live your best life that you could in America?
Yes, fine. You can live your best life, just don't ram it down our throats.
Yes, true. Yeah, and also don't try to take them out while you're leaving.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk to Tom Tugendhat. Tom is a Conservative MP, former leadership contender, former security minister. He's been chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. He is banned by China himself. Tom, this is hugely embarrassing for the royal family, for the British state, I would argue, perhaps even for the security services. Tell us a little bit about your take on what we know now versus what we knew yesterday.
So I'm afraid I don't agree. I think it's embarrassing for Prince Andrew. I'm not sure it's embarrassing for anybody else.
Okay.
The Chinese state has been trying to get people alongside folk in the UK and around the world for many years. The United Front Work Department is a branch of the Chinese Communist Party that seeks to influence and to pressure individuals. We know almost certainly that they've got many different students here in the United Kingdom who are affiliated to it, who work with it, because all Chinese students sadly have to have some connection to the Chinese state in order to get visas, in order to get out. So, we know that there's I'm not blaming every student, it's not their fault. That's simply the reality of living in a totalitarian dictatorship. And many of them would rather not have anything to do with it, of course. So this isn't something, I'm afraid, that there's very much we can do about. In general, what's embarrassing is that it looks like Prince Andrew avoided the constraints that are placed on most sensible people by the Foreign Office and by the intelligence services that keep them safe. I'm afraid, Peter, that even in your time in government, when you were a special advisor, you would have come across, if you came across people in the Chinese orbit, you would have come across people who were connected to the United Front Work Department. You just would. But you, like me, like anybody else, was very careful about how you interacted. You took advice from the Foreign Office, you took advice from the intelligence services, and you made sure that you followed the correct protocols. It appears that the Duke of York did not.
Why do you think he got to this stage? Was it the desperation for money, the desperation for connections, perhaps, that meant that someone who is allegedly such a high-ranking spy could infiltrate someone so close to the heart of the establishment?
Peter, I know quite a lot about China, I know quite a lot about intelligence gathering, but I'm afraid I know nothing at all about the Duke of York, so I'm not going to speculate
That's okay.
on how he may or may not have got there.
Well, tell us then, from your own expertise, tell us how China will have perhaps approached this.
So China is always looking for people to influence various debates. So quite a lot of academics, for example, who are not privileged to intelligence information and are not the sort of people you would think traditionally are the target of spies, will be subject to pressure by the UFWD, as it's called.
So this United Front Work Department, just for our viewers and listeners who are maybe not as familiar as you are with that, just tell us a little bit more about that organisation.
So it's a branch. There's sort of three pillars of the Communist Party. It's one, the PLA is another, and the party itself. And the reality is it was set up by Chairman Mao, so all those years ago when the party was created, in order to sort of bring together those elements of influence, the sort of non-military, non-economic means, well, no, including economic, forgive me, means to influence and to shape, target, and determine action by the party. So it's very much a party tool. It's not a Chinese state tool. It's a party tool. So it's about furthering the interests of the Chinese Communist Party very specifically. And it's an organization that's been going, as I say, since the beginning of the Chinese Communist state about 70 years ago. And it's been going around the world, recruiting academics and influencing different individuals. And some of them are sort of traditional spies, if you like, trying to steal intelligence, sometimes intellectual property from companies, sometimes military secrets. But most of the time, it's not that. Most of the time, it's trying to do things like shaping the debate. So closing down the debate on Tibet in the United Kingdom, for example, or, shouting down lecturers in universities when they question the Chinese line on Xinjiang or Taiwan or any of these different areas where there's reasonable people have expressed different views to the Chinese state, largely because the Chinese state lies very frequently. And so what we found that these organizations can, proceed very actively. In fact, you may have heard a couple of years ago, while I was security minister, we closed down 4 Chinese overseas police stations. There were a few around the world, and we found some here in the United Kingdom. We closed them down, and they were effectively branches of the UFWD.
Goodness me. And yes, I remember that story at the time, those overseas police stations. So a lot of what you're talking about there in the United Front Work Department, part of the Chinese Communist Party, a lot of it is, I struggle to use the word subtle, but it's less overt than a lot of other bits of spying, a lot of other ways that people might try to influence with the blunt tools militarily, for example. This is a long-term way in which the Chinese Communist Party seeks to infiltrate our society.
Right. Look, I mean, nobody would put the words of Prince Andrew and intelligence in the same sentence. This isn't about intelligence gathering. This is about making sure that the party has influence around the area and is able to bring together the various different people that it wants to seek to influence them. So what they're presumably trying to use the Royal Duke for is to make sure that they can, have access and influence to other people. So I don't suppose for a second they were interested in, if you like, spying on Prince Andrew. I suspect what they were looking for was his ability to bring people together and get other people around the table. Although, to be fair, the Chinese state does have a remarkable respect for elders and has a very, very hierarchical impression of things. So perhaps they thought that he had more influence than he did.
Yes, it's interesting about the level of influence, because certainly since he's been out of public life and a royal who is not a working royal, certainly things have changed. But I mean, do you think this is just illustrative of how much Chinese influence there is in our society? Should we take this story perhaps as a warning about how many Chinese spies there will be in so many parts of our society?
Peter, look, this is the point I've been trying to make for the last 10 years, as you know, and it's one of the reasons I'm sanctioned. It's because, people have a view of sort of China as hostile, meaning, they're out to sort of James Bond-like attack the United Kingdom. It's not that at all. What it is they're trying to change the way in which the global economy works so that it centers on Beijing and not on, London and Paris and Berlin and Washington and other places in the sort of free world. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that their companies and their products set the norm so that they're able to dominate the coming economic century. Now, I understand why they're trying to do that. I just think that's a very, very bad idea for the United Kingdom. And my job, let me be quite clear, is to put Britain first. And in defending the interests of the British people, I think it is my job to stand up against Chinese influence in the United Kingdom, against the pressure that they're bringing on British businesses, against the pressure they're bringing on British individuals of whatever rank and standing, and making sure that British people are able to live free and have the economic prosperity that they deserve from the energy and imagination of their own efforts. Now, that's, I would have thought, a pretty clear and obvious thing to do. Sadly, I'm afraid we've found over many years that some people think that the job of the government or a job of others is to build alliances that don't deliver quite what we need. Now, alliances are great, but they're there to make the British people stronger. They're not there for the artistic decoration of the writing.
What would you say to people who say China's a fact of life, it's an economic superpower, we have to deal with it?
Yeah, of course we do. Of course we have to deal with China. That's completely obvious. The question is how we deal with China. And as far as I'm concerned, we should deal with China in an extremely cautious manner. We know, this isn't a secret, we all know that the Chinese Communist Party is seeking to influence the way in which people do business around the world, and the way in which they study, the way in which they think. We've seen this sort of pressure coming in companies like TikTok, which the algorithm is written in Beijing. So whatever you post, you may think that you're posting freely onto a social media platform, but it's not like the other social media platforms. The other social media platforms are simply interested in making money. Now, you may or may not like that, but they're pretty open about what they're trying to do. They're trying to make cash. TikTok's algorithm is written in Beijing, and we don't know what the algorithm is written to do, but we do know that it responds differently, very differently, from the other companies, which suggests that there may not be the same simple financial motivation, and that there may be other motivations. So this is certainly a relevant concern. And given that it is a publisher, after all, an algorithm is a way of choosing how you promote or which bit of news or which bit of dance video of cats or whatever it happens to be is seen by who, you find yourself realizing that actually one of the major publishers in the United Kingdom is controlled by the Chinese state. So, we need to be aware that that is the situation we're dealing with. We need to be aware that the reality is that China has different interests to ours, and that as a dictatorship, it's able to bring the resources of the state through various different arms. Now, I think my job is to protect the British people. That's what I'll continue to do.
Just finally, Tom, do you think this H6 person should be named? Do you think that should be in the public domain?
Well, look, I'd like them to be. I suspect they won't be.